Welcome to our 9th Character Evolution Cast episode. For this episode, we'll be exploring character creation with Aaron and Jeff from the All My Fantasy Children podcast. But before we get to that, we have a few announcements. First up, we're both all set for lodging for GenCon now. Hopefully everyone was able to get something decent for themselves. I wanted to say a personal thanks to the One Shot Network for assisting in making that process relatively painless. Speaking of GenCon, we're still working out details for our events, but we'll hopefully have those details ready soon. It'll be great to see you there, so keep an eye out for when those go live. Also, guess what? Shadow of the Cabal Season 2 starts this Friday. It's an entirely new storyline with entirely new characters, even one of them played by Amelia. There's also a show and tell episode coming out soon on the RPG Academy feed featuring Tanner and Amelia discussing the new season, so check that out as well. Finally, we need more of your amazing reviews. If you have a moment, you can leave a review on our Apple Podcasts listing, our Stitcher page, or our Facebook page. We'll read it out during our normal cold opens, and it'll also make us feel really great whenever we get one of those. So please check those out, and please leave a review if you have a moment. With all of that out of the way, let's get on with the show. Enjoy. Welcome to Character Evolution Cast, a show where we discuss what to do with all those characters we just made. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan, and today my co-host Amelia and I are joined by Aaron Catano-Saez and Jeff Stormer from the All My Fantasy Children podcast to talk about different ways to approach character creation, regardless of the system you are working with.
Woo!
Welcome to Character Evolution Cast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's neat. What a treat. What a neat treat.
We get to all talk about characters all at once.
Yes.
All of our favorite things.
It's true.
Aaron, can you tell everybody a bit about yourself and some of the cool stuff you are involved in?
I am Aaron Catano-Saez. I live in New York City where I attempt to do theater, wait tables, but also I co-host All My Fantasy Children. I'm a voice actor, and I occasionally stream video games.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. All the cool teens and millennials are doing it.
I've heard that.
Yeah. That's what I read on Kotaku. It's this video game website.
You probably haven't heard of it.
No.
And Jeff, what about yourself?
I am Jeff Stormer. I am a podcaster, game designer, and the official LARP designer of the Olive Garden restaurant. And unlike Aaron, I don't read Kotaku because I was featured on it. So,
Wow.
I was
Called
part
out.
of
What?
Yeah, right.
Wait,
I
Jeff, am I on the horn with the Jeff Stormer?
You are, yes. One of them. Wow. One of them. There are 3 of them to my knowledge. One of them shares my birthday, and both of them, I've been involved in intense email drama with both of them. These are stories for another day.
What an introduction.
I host Party of One, which is an actual play focused on 2-player role-playing experiences. I'm also one of the co-hosts of All My Fantasy Children, a podcast about character creation, storytelling, and world building, powered by tabletop role-playing games. And once a year, I host a podcast about eggnog, where I talk about the past, present, and future of everyone's favorite eggy, creamy, boozy Yuletide treat.
You're so good at that. You're so good at these introductions. I was like, yeah, I don't know. I do a bunch of stuff.
Confession, I have never tried eggnog.
Oh, you're missing out. It's magical.
You have to get the right brand. You have to get the right brand.
Nothing beats homemade. It is a thing that you'll buy it from the store and settle. But nothing beats a good homemade aged eggnog.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's like dairy poison. It is just like mud. It's dairy mud. Otherwise.
I have had homemade alcohol-free eggnog before, but I believe I was probably closer to 10 years old at that point.
Yeah, see, and we're
try it
from
as a
like
big
a
boy.
dairy-based state, Ryan. Like, we should do better.
I guess.
I guess. What a dismissal. I guess.
I feel like I need to leave now. I feel like there's some stuff happening here that I don't feel comfortable being here.
I told eggnog eggnog isn't always great.
I personally love the taste of eggnog.
Thank you. Now I feel at home.
It's like you have to welcome a vampire into your home.
Precisely.
Wow.
Awesome.
Off to a winning start here.
Well, one of our goals on Character Creation Cast, aside from making amazing people, is to introduce our audience to people who are doing some amazing things in the RPG world and the real world too. So we are going to start there. First, I'd like to ask, what would you say is your favorite character creation experience that you've had so far between any of the number of games that you've played? And what sticks out the most in your mind?
Jeff, would you like to start?
Favorite character creation experience of all time was probably in early college, before podcasting came along and changed everything. A friend and I sat down at a table, and he was running a Traveler game.
Ooh.
And he sat down with each player and rolled a Traveler character for an afternoon. Like, it was an hour. Each of us got an hours long character creation experience of like rolling on tables and saying, all right, what does this now say about that character story? We went through all of this. We made like 4 or 5 like deep, rich, fascinating characters. I was a decorated police officer who retired to a desk job, but was then framed for crimes that I did not commit and was involved in an international conspiracy. We then all showed up at the table. We played one session. Half of us died, and we all agreed to just not play Traveler anymore.
That's awesome.
I still make Traveler characters for fun. Like, that's still a thing I do. But like, I just have it's a game that I have really no desire to play past character creation.
Yeah.
That's how I felt about it too. I enjoyed our character creation for that one because like random tables are fun.
They're
but
neat.
then as soon as I started looking into how you play this game, I was like, no, this is just life debt the game.
Like,
and I don't want to play that.
The thing
I'm a
about it
millennial.
is-
I already have that.
That's a good point. The other thing is, like, I like the whole, like, you have space debt and you're trying to, like, make ends meet. But I find that, like, just the actual mechanical resolution systems are just not that interesting. There's just not that much, like, neat things happening. And it feels like the game is specifically kind of geared towards not doing cool or neat things. And I was left underwhelmed after making this cool character to watch him not do cool things for an afternoon and then die in space.
You mean you didn't enjoy playing tabletop Sims?
I did not enjoy Tabletop Sims. I would enjoy Tabletop Sims, but I did not enjoy Tabletop Sims.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I feel like it to me, looking at it, having never played it, it felt very much like Spreadsheets, the RPG.
It does have a little bit of that.
Which I'm sure appeals to some people, but I do spreadsheets in my real job, so
That's fair.
I'm good.
Aaron, what about you? What's your favorite experience making a character?
I have it, and I hope it doesn't sound like a cop-out, but the first character I ever made, it was before I played with you, Jeff, when you gave me the groundwork of how to make a Dungeons & Dragons character. I went home and for like 8 hours put so much work into a bard, that had a really bad JRPG reference name. Like, it was so deep, this half-elf bard. I put so much into this story. And then we never actually played a game for like a year, so I never used it. And it was an important lesson. It was an important. Everyone's had that moment when you write that backstory and you kind of never get to bring it up ever.
No.
So I think that it.
No, please,
go ahead.
Please finish your story.
It was a very valuable moment for me to realize that, like, hey, when you play tabletop games, everyone's going to be trying to jockey for their cool story too. So sometimes you might need to take a back seat and like not care as much.
Now,
sometimes it's okay to relax.
What I am hearing here is that you spent 8 hours creating a character with a rich backstory and like deep motivations. And then when we finally played together, you said, I'm going to make a bard named Kudgy.
That's correct.
And I'm going to put no work into this character.
Because I learned my lesson, I learned my lesson. I didn't know that it would matter.
You learned the wrong lesson.
Or like maybe overlearned, or...
I love Kudgy like a son. He was a perfect angel.
It's true. But yeah, that's my favorite tabletop experience. It was like really getting like excited and really hyped up, but then never using that character, but they will live on forever in my heart. And that experience of like rolling their feet and figuring out their equipment and their skills. Like I never even used it, but that is my definite favorite character creation experience.
We made an entire podcast off of that exact sort of experience. Like, let's roll up these characters, let's come up with a cool story for them, and then let's put them away and never touch them again.
Of course.
It's, I mean, sometimes heartbreaking, but sometimes I feel like, you know, they're at their peak, like it will never get better than this. And
I mean, they
playing
live on a
them
shelf.
can only ruin it.
Yeah, they live on a shelf like an action figure, and that's okay. You can look at them and acknowledge their accomplishments, but, you know, their story is encapsulated in that one action pose that it's only for you.
Yes, they're in mint condition right now.
Exactly.
So on a similar note, I want to ask, is there a system that you would absolutely love to make characters in, but have not had the chance to yet?
I can start.
Please.
The character creation system that I've always wanted to, it does not really, it's hard to, we could use it with the format of All My Fantasy Children, but I've always wanted to make a masks character, like make a superhero or villain, just because there's just something so deeply satisfying about making like an angsty, young hero whose like powers awaken, or someone who's had power within them, and learning how to kind of like deal with that, and you know, all the ways that the world may affect like a young person who's different. It's something that I've always kind of wanted to get into, definitely in the show, but definitely also just in like, I kind of want to play masks. That's something I've never been able to get the opportunity to do though.
We can make that happen. I mean, that's not out of the range.
Damn.
Like, we could just play masks. Like you just had to mention it, my dude.
Let's do it. All right.
We'll put a date on the calendar.
All right, I'll talk to you guys later.
All right.
Bye.
Great. I'm gonna stop recording on Audacity. Is that all right? We're good?
Yes, good, great.
Cool.
It's a wrap.
Awesome. That's sick.
The game that I'm gonna go off on the same lines of like a game that I've always wanted to play, and part of the reason that I've never been able to make a character in this game is because the experience of making a character is very specifically tied to the gameplay experience at the table. The game that I've always wanted to play, and like part of it is the character creation is very tied to the mechanics of the game, and it's a very special game, is Ribbon Drive by Avery Alder. It's
I haven't heard that one.
Oh, it's the game. It is the game that I will one day play, and it is like my white whale of a game. Ribbon Drive is a game that uses mixtapes as the central mechanic. It basically you are playing people on a road trip who are going to like find something about themselves. Everybody before play makes a mix CD or a mixtape about an hour in length. You put them all, like you shuffle them all or you bring them all together, you pick one at random, and the first song on the mixtape is where you are going, and the second song is who your character is. But it is all determined on, like, everyone's mixtape that has been made. You randomly select one, and that is, like, where you start. So, like, I've never been able to play this game. Right? I'm upset. I want to play this game so badly.
Yes.
I have so many mixtapes.
Oh, I've been trying to, like, this is my goal for, like, this year, maybe, is to just get better at mixtapes and playlists, because there's an art to it, and I'm not very good at it yet, but I'm starting to dabble, and I'm enjoying it.
Good.
But, yeah, so, like, the experience of it is very much, like, you cannot, like, make a character for it outside of the play experience, which is part of what I like about it, but I've never gotten to, like, play this game proper. And so one day I will play it in the very near future, I hope, because it's, like, it is a game that is so close to my heart and speaks to me on such, like, a deep level, as someone that has been making mix CDs to capture emotion since I was, like, a child.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's such a cool experience. Like, I love games like that are just doing totally new and crazy things that you would think, like, that's not a role-playing game, but it is. And someone was like, you know what would be, like, I want to know how that thought process goes because I'm not a designer, but like that moment of like, yeah, we could do that. We could make that into a game. Like, that's so cool. I want to like experience that at some point.
I wish I could explain how that experience works because like I've had that experience and I can't fully put into words like how it works because I've had the experience of like, what if I did a game that used karaoke as a mechanic or like or soup and salad and like I don't know how like that gimmick there's literally like a scene missing reel in my brain of like I want to do this. And then, okay, now I'm like ready to, I've tried to explain to people the process that my brain goes through and it's hard to put into words. It sort of just happens sometimes.
Yeah, I'm always interested in that tipping point between, hey, this is maybe an idea to, oh, no, it's done. It's too late. I close my eyes and it's over. Like there's always that moment where you're like, it goes from idea to, okay, well now I have to. And
for sure.
That second is very intriguing to me. Now that we know a little bit more about both of you, we're going to get into the fun stuff. As usual, our goal is to help people be better players. So we try to gear our discussions toward players, not just GMs, and how they can improve their experiences at the table. Normally, we talk about creating characters by the rules of certain RPGs. That's what our main show is about. And then eventually kind of adding some backstory during the process. But today, we are going to talk about the actual process of creating characters.
Yeah. Creating characters can easily be an exercise in just picking a character type and working through the motions of the rules. And then you end up with a playable person. Some systems may even have built-in rules for creating backgrounds for the characters through things like random tables or suggestions or whatever. But what if we wanted to dig a little deeper and create some truly inspired characters that we'll remember that much more? Well, on today's episode, we'll be discussing how to approach character creation for any RPG so that you can have some tools to better approach this process for yourselves. Whether you are wanting to start playing in your very first game, or even if you are a veteran at the table, we hope you can get some good information from this conversation.
Hey, me too. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, so you're going to learn so many things here. It's going to be great. You're like, great, I can't wait to learn.
I'm like, whoa, cool. Who's coming in? Who's coming in to do that?
Who's the guest?
You guys got more people coming in?
Oh, wait, you said experts? I'm confused.
I'm sitting here like Lenny at the award ceremony with the two like fingers in my nose, like, yes, good. I'm listening.
Yeah.
Let's start off with your experience on All My Fantasy Children. How do you go from a short character prompt to an actual character? Is there a specific process that you tend to use, or do you kind of do it a little bit differently every time?
That's a really good question. I think a lot of it is, I think like that first moment when we look at that like initial prompt is one of my favorite moments.
Same.
Because I love having that, like, I love having that moment of like, there's all these ways we can go with it. And for us, I think a lot of it, and Aaron, if you have more thoughts on this, I'd love to hear them. But like the idea of looking at like this little character prompt, for instance, like I don't know,
The Bard Who Sings. The Bard Who Sings
is a good one. Looking at it and going, okay, why? Why do they sing? What makes them a bard? You know, what makes them the bard that sings instead of a, like, breaking it down piece by piece, almost word by word, and saying, like, okay, if we are establishing this as a canon fact, what else does that tell us? If we have X as a constant, what does that tell us about, like, A, B, and C, and X and Y and Z?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. Like, it really is breaking down just the prompt itself is, you know, that's the initial thing of thinking about your character, or any character, say like the Bard Who Sings, like what does it mean to be a bard? What is the training that go into it and the confines of the world? Are they actually a bard? Are they a rock star? You know, all the things that we do in tabletop games where we twist the character class into different things that we want or need. But for me, it's all about images. And there's always an initial image that pops into your head with you're a human, you think in images. And when you hear that initial prompt, say like the bard who sings, you get an image, you get a picture. And it's kind of this safety net that we have in All My Fantasy Children where you say, like we say, the prompt is the bard who sings. What's your initial thoughts? And I say, my initial thought is the bard who sings. So obviously they are incredibly well trained, and if Jeff disagrees, you disagree, and then we go in a different direction. But it definitely has to start, I think, with an image, an initial thought, an initial, just some kind of ignition to really get the car moving. You don't really need, like, the destination is way off in the distance. You have to first get in the car and then start it. And then you can worry about driving and where the story is going to go on the road. But you first have to just get in the car and throw out something. Just as long as you got something, it'll trigger something else in one of our heads, and we can start really moving with like what the world is, who this character is, and where their place is in it.
That's cool. So it's a very collaborative process, it feels like. Oh,
it is. Yeah, it is 100% just... we take the prompt probably like 10 minutes before we record. And then we make up the entirety of it right there, everything down to like, all right, so what class are they? When it comes to things like a beloved train conductor, we're like, okay, does that mean they have a character class, or is this just like an artisan?
Or is this just somebody that owns a train?
Yeah. It is like, and we bounce ideas back and forth, and it is collaboratively done. And it's like, and then the world is made as a result of what that person's place is in the world. That informs us about the world that they then live in.
And I think even if you're doing this by yourself, if you're listening to this and keep wondering how to like build that backstory off of like a very simple idea, if you're like, I want to do like a bard that sings, you can like build off of it by saying like I said, like you can build off of it by going, okay, why do they sing? How did they become a singer? What was the training that made them into a bard? Like, how do they feel about that? By asking questions, you can like create that sort of collaborative discovery atmosphere, even if you're by yourself. I think is a valuable skill to just say like, okay, but now what is like a very valuable question, right? Like what else is there is like a valuable question.
Like, if you're going to be role-playing in this role-playing game, tabletop role-playing game, you have to kind of think of it like an RP or like a LARP or something. So, like in acting, the important questions are like, what's your objective? But really, that means like, what do you want? How are you going to get it? If you get it, like, is that it? Or what else are you going to want? Like, will you want more of that? Like, this bard, we always go, okay, so that's great. They sing, they're the most legendary bard, but what do they want? Because that will tell you your character's quest. That'll tell you why you're even playing this game with your friends. Your character will know then, like, we're all going to kill the dragon in the dungeon, but everyone can be doing it for very specifically different reasons. They just happen to be all in the same place. Just how we go about our days. Like, some people go to their job because, they're not in it for the money, and they do it because they love the work. Some people are like, I'm just trying to put food on the table. I hate this job. They're all doing the same thing, but it's how they go about it and what they want and how they're going to get it. And that kind of puts you on your quest. So definitely, if you're sitting alone and you're like, all right, I want to make a character, I usually like write the character's name or like write in a box, like bard, write an arrow down and kind of just make like a flowy little chart of like possibilities of what they want, who they are. And then all the other things like gear and skill traits, those will come from knowing who this person is and what they want. Like, if you know that your character is like, oh, they're highborn, they're a princess from a forgotten kingdom lost in the woods. You're like, all right, then she knows how to ride. She knows probably some like basic self-defense moves. She's not going to be like a crude fighter. She's probably been taught by like the town blacksmith or like the sword teacher of the castle. There's a lot of just details that'll eventually just push you on your way in terms of like being ready to start, just from wondering like, what do I want and who am I in this world?
Have you guys ever taken the same prompt and then made characters separately to like come back together and see how differently you make them?
Yes.
Not intentionally, but yes, we did do that one time because there was a snowstorm that meant that we could not like reasonably record together for like a week. And we were like, well, we just can't record together. So we took one prompt and we each did a solo episode and released it, and then we listened to the other person's episode, and they think they're both great.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think about that, like that you start with a 1-sentence prompt, and the amount of different directions that you can go with that is crazy. And I wonder about like taking that same prompt and making a bunch of different characters with that same prompt. But I know that like having done it once the first time, you're already kind of like that would influence decisions of doing it again. Mm-hmm. So I'm just intrigued to see like how two different people make the same thing into something totally different. I know that that's something I've been talking a lot with my son about, because we've been listening to podcasts, and he's talking about how he imagines things looking, and I imagine them totally differently. And so we've had a discussion recently about like how the decisions that you make are informed by your experiences and things like that. And so it's fascinating to me that people can like play the same game and play it totally differently, that you can start, that like if you make a bard and I make a bard, they would look totally different because what we want for them is different and our experiences are different. And I think that's, I don't know, I love that about character creation and just RPGs in general. Like, it's so
That's
good.
kind of what the show is like Jeff and I sitting down, because when we make a decision about like what character we're going to make and what decision we go in, it's like, all right, I say like, I have a pitch. What if, the bard was from a village and it was burned by this evil villain? And Jeff is like, okay, well, my idea was this. I saw him more as this. And then like you can either meet in the middle, pick neither of them or just pick one. And that's kind of the joy of the show, is that Jeff comes from I do not come from such a tabletop background. I come from more of just like, I enjoy the experience and I enjoy the role play aspect and the character creation and like the events world. But in terms of like tables and games and stuff, I am unfamiliar with that. And Jeff's like wellspring of experience in terms of fiction and fantasy and sci-fi, and like, everybody has their own favorite kinds of tropes that, that really tickle their fancy.
Definitely.
And, when you bring those two together, especially when there are some similarities, but a lot of differences, I think it can be really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that kind of leads into our next point of discussion, and having a character prompt is a really great starting point, but most of us don't have that to work with generally, and creating a character in a vacuum can usually be a very difficult ask of people, especially if they're not used to it. So what sort of things should we know from either the GM or the whole group before we actually dive into some serious character creation?
I think that like something to consider, and this is something that like I think we discovered on All My Fantasy Children fairly early, which is that like the early episodes of the show, the way that the show worked is, I'll get back around to the question. This is a long-winded and pointless story. Everybody get ready.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
So in the early episodes of the show, the way that it worked is we would have a prompt and we had a game, and we said like, we're going to use this prompt. We're going to take this prompt and it's an orc in high school. We're going to take this game and it's Traveler, and we're going to mash them together.
Oh, no.
We very quickly realized that like the game, and like we very quickly realized that like as we were doing that, we were basically like leaning harder on the prompt than we were the game. And eventually just went, we don't actually need to pick a game in advance, because like what we have is this prompt. But the thing to consider is you can also go in the other direction and say, okay, I have a game. Like the game that you choose can serve as that like initial hook, like idea, that prompt, for lack of a better term. It's okay. I am playing Shadow of the Demon Lord. I am playing a changeling. What does this say about the person, the character that I am playing? Like, what do these questions, and it gives you that same sort of starting place of like, okay, I am playing Dungeon World. The paladin says this, this, and this, and gives me these abilities. Now you have questions of, how did I get these abilities? Where did they come from? What drove me to want to be the law, for like, as the playbook describes, what makes me want to be the law? You have these same sort of prompts based on the game that you're playing, rather than like a prompt that has been submitted. So I think that like that is something that specifically within tabletop games is tremendously powerful, because you are often not always, but often given a launch pad to jump off of by saying, but as soon as you make that like initial choice of this is the mechanical thing that I want to do, this is the class I want to play, this is even going as far as like this is the game that I want to play. If you play Masks, you are saying we want superheroes, we want teenagers, we want multiple generations of superheroes, and we want to tell this story. Those are also questions that you can do the same sort of collaborative world building on and saying, okay, cool. Why are all of these things important to me? And like both the character that I'm making, but also me as the player, what excites me about those things.
Yeah.
And for me, I think if you don't have a prompt and you want to know, like, you know, how to get something, how to get a little catalyst going, if you know what kind of experience you want to have with your character, like that alone, like its base level is, I want a character that protects people, you know, and then you start there and you're like, okay, so I can do that in a number of ways in this game. Mm-hmm. You know, do I want to buff my allies as a bard, or do I want to heal my friends? Do I want to protect them, or do I want to be a tank? And then you're like, okay, so this character, think of the character, honestly, as like an empty sack of skin, and every detail kind of like fills them up with liquid. Like you have an empty sack and you're like, this character wants to protect people. Cool, that's their boots. We're there. And then you're like, okay, so that tells me that this person is a little selfless. And then you're like, okay, what makes them selfless? Are they headstrong? And then like, as you keep going, you might find yourself being like a tanky fighter or a tanky paladin or something. You know, it's based on what the experience you want to have. And I think a lot of what you're looking for can be decoded in character creation. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like whatever you're after and whatever you want, you know, you can, whatever you want experience, you can just honestly, if you're not really in the mood for like deep analysis, just go like, I want to play a character that like, you know, wants revenge. And you're like, okay, that's fine. Plug it into this bucket of skin and fuel them up and zip your boots up and you're ready to go.
Before you know it, you've got a human-shaped skin sack full of liquidy goo. And really, what's better than that for like a game night with your friends?
I mean, if that isn't tabletop, I don't know what is.
Yeah. Like, they want to protect, though, Jeff. But, like, you know, it just comes down to, honestly, what the experiences you want to have as a character and as a player. Because, like, you're just playing a game. Mm-hmm. So, like, what kind of experiences are you looking to have? You looking to have that deep RP? Or are you trying to just, like, you know, throw a lot of dice and lay a lot of damage down?
Yeah, for sure.
Depends on your goals.
And I think there's room for both of those, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think that really, as long as you're honest with yourself about what kind of experience you want, you will come out with a character that kind of fits that. I think that as long as you know, like I had a D&D game where going into it, I knew that my group was going to be very combat focused. Mm-hmm. Like those were the kinds of people that I was playing with. And so going into it, I said, okay, I'm going to make a character that is going to be really good in combat because I know that that is going to be the most fun experience for me. Normally that's not the kind of character that I like to play, but in this game, otherwise, I'm going to end up sitting out. So the thing that will be fun for me will be to have a character that is good at those things. Mm-hmm. And so I think as long as you're honest with yourself going into it about what kind of experience you want to have, you'll come out with something enjoyable.
It's true.
Yeah. And I think that's like, part of what makes like a session zero really powerful tool, especially for character creation. Mm-hmm. Even if you're not necessarily discussing things around character creation, being able to sit down and go through things like, is this going to be a combat game? Are we playing a horror game or an action game? Like where does our VHS tape sit in the Blockbuster video? And like what are we all after as far as gameplay? Then that's even, you know, if we're thinking about this in terms of like having a prompt to build your fantasy child off of, all of those things are perfectly good prompts to use. It's like, okay, cool. If I were playing a horror game, like who is the protagonist that like I would want to explore with to be scared? It's like, okay, cool. That's a prompt. Those are questions that I can ask and build something off of. Or it's, okay, cool. We're doing like a combat heavy game. What in a combat situation is going to be the most fun for me to do? There's a lot like generating questions, I think, is for me like the most important thing. And I think there are so many places to pull questions from that like you can answer both for yourself and for the character. You know, like the character will introduce themselves to you and you will introduce yourself into the character.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I know that when we did our Session Zero episodes too, I think that the place that we suggested people start is with an elevator pitch of like, what is this game? If you have 10 seconds to tell people like what is going to happen in this one shot or this campaign, what would you say? And I think that in a lot of ways that really is a good starting prompt for character creation of like, we are going to play this game where we do this. Great. What am I going to do to fit into that story then? Like, what is going to be, what part do I want to play in this novel of a game that we are going to play?
And that's why I love our podcast, because I don't have to play a game. I just go, what do I want to do today? I want to talk about ghost trains today, Jeff. Let's talk about ghost trains. Is there a game with ghost trains in them? You're like, no, but...
I just want to talk about stand-up comedy. Can we just talk about stand-up for an hour? Yeah, I guess. I don't know what we're going to talk about.
We'll make him a wizard eventually, but, I want them to be this first.
You could always go that route too. Like, we have Twitter, we have Facebook. You can go on there and ask people for character prompts. Why not?
Yeah. Oh, we do it every week.
Exactly. See, you know what? Trust the experts. It works for them. You can do it too.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've talked about kind of the basics of the game that you're going to play. So if we kind of go more specific than that, how do you go about tackling a character that focuses on what they can do rather than like who they are? What can that tell us about a character?
Well, this is my favorite subject.
Then feel free. Take it.
Like,
take it and run with it.
Like how character details can inform like their abilities.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's down to the realm of possibilities in this category are so infinite, and like you can get so much information out of like the tiniest drop from a character. Like, for example, like if you want to play like a cleric, like what skills you pick? Or do you mean like a bare bones character we don't know the class yet?
Like, say you have a class in mind and the abilities of that class. What does that tell you about that character as a person?
It's the best because you can always twist and mold to make it fit you. Like it's my problem with the class barbarian. I find it to be very boring because it's so fueled by rage, and it's so fueled by like, well, they're angry and they're like, oh, well, they get into a rage and you do this and that, and you do extra damage, blah, 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 blah. Where it's like, you can always figure out like, well, first of all, why the gosh dang is this barbarian so angry? You know what I mean? And it's always things like that, like the cleric. But better example is the cleric, where tapping into a divine power in order to channel abilities. It always comes down to like, you always have the question in a game of, why are you following this deity? Why are you a disciple of, Superman? What is it about this character? What is it about this deity that empowers you? It comes down to details. Sorry, I'm not as well spoken as Jeff. I'm just going to ramble.
Go for it.
It is literally in anything. Gear. It's in your hairstyle. You can find anything. Like right now, I've said this before, and if I'm repeating myself, I don't mind. If you look around your house or apartment, whatever, right now, and you see the objects that you own, you will have a memory attached to them. You'll know how you acquired it. It's the same exact thing with any tabletop game and your equipment or your skills. Like if I were a mage, like I would want, because I'm me and I just want to get down to those cool nitty gritty details. If I know I'm going to be throwing out like frost bolts or, cone of frost, I'm going to be like, when did my character learn that? Were they like in school? Did they see someone do it and did they copy it? There's a lot of cool things to be mined from that kind of stuff of like, how did my character learn this? From a book? Okay, so one, they can read. That's an important detail. And two, like they can acquire it. Did they practice for years? Because that means they're disciplined. That means this isn't like a natural talent that just looks at a book once and picks up a fire spell. There's a lot to be found in just every ability going like, well, how did I learn that? If you're proficient in longsword, you're like, who taught me that? Did I do it myself? Because that is going to shape the character in a different way. If you have the whole like double weapon, dual wielding proficiency, I'm like, who just picks that up? You have to like either learn that or you're just flailing.
And like, at what point in your life where you were like, you know what? One sword, not gonna do it.
No,
Not enough.
I need the second.
I am a 2-sword man.
And that would be very interesting, though, to ask, like,
Yeah.
what was the day that you were like, you know what? This hand's too warm. I need cold steel in it. And then I'm going to learn how to do this. Wouldn't that be cool? Like, your character immediately becomes like an experimental, like, show person who's like, you know, very theatrical in their combat because it's so unnecessary to dual wield.
And that kind of gets at the point that like I think I approach if I'm starting with a class, the thing that that Aaron hit on that I think is exactly right, that I think I approach the exact same way, is I think about the fact that like if you are playing a class in a game, it says that you have certain abilities. It says that you have certain things that you can do that other people simply cannot do. Mm-hmm. So then you have to have that question of like, well, how did I get that good? Like, if I am a cleric, it is not just that I worship a being. It is that I worship an ideal or a being so fervently that I then break the laws of reality to, like, impart their will on the universe. Mm-hmm. Like, how am I that faithful? What has driven me to this? What has driven my belief to this level? Like, there are so many questions to be mined out of, like, okay, these are the things that it is the game is telling me that these facts are canon. There's a whole lot of missing pieces there that I think are fascinating.
Yeah, just like a fantasy person in a robe, that does not make a wizard. They have to like practice and stuff. And like, no, you have to literally know magic. Where like a fighter doesn't know magic. Why do you know magic and they don't? Get to the bottom of that. You're not just someone in robes shooting lightning bolts. Like that's the most interesting thing to me is like, because we do it with superhero stories all the time. Like, what makes this person special that no one else can do what you do? Well, I'm Superman and I'm from Krypton. And blah. Oh, cool. That makes a lot of sense then. Too often in tabletop, it's like, well, I'm a wizard, so I can shoot fire. Like, okay, that's and more, please feed me. You know?
Yeah, I think about like the acrobatics skill in particular.
Oh my
and I'm
God!
like, you know, like so many characters, like it's a starting skill. Like you have acrobatics. Why on earth?
Where did you just learn that?
Like,
How many years of gymnastics did you take? Where?
Right? Like, was this like a summer camp that you went to? Is this like all my friends were doing it? So I thought, you know, why not? I will go to the local gymnasium and see what happens. Like, are you an Olympic level athlete? Like, where did this come from?
Yes, when they're always like, roll an athletics check. I'm like, you're under stress and you can do a cartwheel and dodge an arrow? Oh my God. Like, That's super impressive.
So cool.
I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that those are things that you're right. We don't often think about in tabletop games in the same way that we do when you're, you know, like writing a novel or something like that. Like you start to consider, why does this person know this thing? And I think some of it comes down to the fact that when we play tabletop games, we are playing forward. You are not playing out your backstory. And so there's a tendency to think, it doesn't matter. It's not going to come up at the table, whatever. But it informs so much of who you are. Like why I have this skill says something about who I am and where I came from and how I was brought up and all of those things without ever having to explain them at the table. It's a very much of a show, don't tell. But you can kind of think through that and it can inform so many things. Like now you know that this person was really great at gymnastics growing up. Like we know that you attended that weird summer camp, whatever it is.
I really like when you think about on top of that, what does it feel to do these things? You know, as your character, like you're casting magic, but how does that feel? I mean, what does your character experience as you're weaving these spells and literally pulling at the fabrics of reality and altering the real world with this weird arcane energy?
Like that has to be exhausting, right? Like I always think about that. I'm like, these people are just like, oh, do a spell, ta-da. And I'm like, no, you are like messing up the laws of nature. Like that you have to be really tired.
Or exhilarating.
Yeah,
right.
There's so much from a PC. I mean, like like Aaron, playing the game that I don't get the opportunity a lot, so I get to think about it a lot, which is, I think, a lot cooler. Where you think about, like you said, the exhilaration and the feeling of doing things, like combat. Like we always take that for granted in tabletop games. Like, how does your character feel about violence? you know, I think is one of the most important questions to ask when you're playing a tabletop game. Because like, you're a wizard and like, oh, I'm a glass cannon, I'm really soft. I'm like, that's fear of like, I don't want someone to get in close with a battle axe because they will one-shot me. And like, you know, and something that people take for granted, I think, is the idea of an experience point. You know, they've had an experience and they change as a result. They get more powerful. Like, how do they change as a person after killing 6 bandits? You know, after saving a town, how does your person, because everybody's like, yeah, you know, my character is the hilarious Grog the Barbarian who always has a one-liner and a swing of the battle axe, where it's like, no, but how does Grog change after they just killed 6 bandits single-handedly? Like, is the axe quivering in their hand? Is there like, what have I wrought? Or is it like more? And that'll show you a lot about what kind of player you are, and also kind of what your experience, like what you wanted going into this game might shift after combat. Combat should, I think, define and shape a lot of your character in a session.
So the two things that I really briefly, I don't want to weigh down this with questions of like why, but there's 2 things that I want to call out briefly. One, why is it that you could like think, I encourage you, if you're making a character, and particularly if they're a wizard, going to your point about it being exhausting, think about the fact that like you can only cast like a spell once a day.
Yo,
the idea that like
serious.
This spell is like powerful to a point where I can cast it once and then I need to take a nap.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
true.
It's like eating a meatball sub after
Like,
every cast.
The other thing is, I thought about this a lot. You reach a certain point, you reach a certain point of like faithful paladinhood, then a horse just shows up. A horse just emerges and is like, well, I'm here with you now. And you're like, I feel like that is a thing that is often taken for granted, is that like, well, I have been just and good and lawful, and now there's a horse.
I deserve a horse.
Have you ever
and the
seen
universe
a horse?
gave me one.
They're gigantic. And imagine this gigantic animal just trots up and just sort of like sits near you, and you're like, well, I get, like, I think that's something that is worth thinking about. If you're thinking about, like, I want to play this class, like, why?
Yeah,
what does it mean that this animal has just, like, attached itself to you?
Like, my whole summary for how I feel about just character creation is don't take a single thing for granted, whether it happens before when you're doing all that super cool backstory that, like, probably won't matter, or, like, don't take things for granted that are happening as you're playing, and thinking about, like, your character's not stagnant. They're not this, like, they're not a mannequin. They're a living thing that can change. Like, don't take a single experience, you pick up a magic sword. You now use it. So you threw your grandfather's great sword away. You just left it in the dungeon. Like, don't take a single detail about this campaign or this thing for granted. And I think that applies across the board in character creation. Don't take a drop of anything for granted, because there's something to gain from it in terms of having a more fully fleshed out experience at the table.
Yeah, because it really sets you up for some really amazing storytelling. If you say, well, okay, I get a lawn sword and a crossbow. Well, this lawn sword was my grandfather's that was used in some big battle of some big war. And this crossbow was my father's. And now I'm going to go adventuring with this gear. And what if one of them breaks? How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
And like, why is no one ever concerned about that magic sword? They're just like, sure, magic sword. I find those lying around all over the place. Like, nobody's concerned about what that magic is or like how it got there. Like, why? Who enchanted this sword? Why is it like that?
Yeah, I think all too often players get into this comfortable sort of stats-based role-playing where it's like, okay, I've got X, Y, and Z added to my character. That makes me A, B, and C stronger in these areas. And when I go into combat, it's 100% strategy, moving my pieces around and trying to win the battle, instead of thinking about how my character feels in the moment, how I feel when my blade strikes another opponent's blade in heated mortal combat.
Yes, it's so real.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that there's certainly room, because I think there are people who, like struggle with the narrative portion of it, because I think that it does require a lot of creativity and a lot of thinking. And so I think that there definitely is room for people who like the strategy part of it.
100%.
But I also think that there is there should be a higher level of requirement for people to kind of be present in that moment. Like while you're playing a game, like think about the world that you're in and kind of be like, don't always be thinking about like, what am I going to do on my next turn? Like think about where am I fitting in this story and these things that are happening around me, and kind of, like I said, be present in that moment and think about things as they are happening, not only as they apply to you, but as they apply to the story as a whole.
Yeah, like I would never want to imply that the only way to play a tabletop game is like by being Daniel Day-Lewis and like, you know, living as this character, you know, and like having a cool voice. Like, no, you don't need to do that. It's just a fun thing might be to say, like when you're in combat, instead of thinking of how I think of tabletop when I listen to it sometimes is click, clack, and numbers, where like it's people talking, there's a dice roll sound, someone says a number. I'm like, oh my goodness. So I think of it as like a little, like everybody makes the joke when they're making fun of actors, when actors in TV and sketches go like, what would my character do? But like that question alone can make tabletop really so valuable. Much easier. Yeah, it's so much easier. If you're in a fight, not thinking about like, well, how do I maximize my damage? You're like, what would my character do? I don't know. If I'm a paladin, I'd probably like dive in the way of some damage. All right, I'm going to do that. You have to think less when your character is fully fleshed out. You have less work to do. Like you just know what your decisions would be based on this, what your character would want, not what you want. You know, you have less work. So why not go ham making this character? You don't have to, once again, you don't have to Daniel Day-Lewis it, but like it'll just make it a lot easier knowing who your character is in this world. Because then you'll just have a lot less thinking to do, and you'll have a lot more of like fun just being like, oh yeah, Kaji is an instrumentalist. He's a purist. Like, if my party's going down, he is not stopping the fife. The fife plays on. It's like, Kaji, but we need healing. It's like, I have to play your funeral ballad then. You know, it's, and it's just those kind of details that you think less, have more fun.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's a thing that I hear a lot of people complain about, is that like combat slows things down, or it takes too long, or because you are spending that time thinking like, when is my next turn? And so I think this is an opportunity to find something that maybe will occupy you during that time too. Like thinking about, okay, I did my turn, I killed whatever 6 goblins, and then you can spend some time thinking about like, okay, well, how did I feel about that? Like, what did that do to me? What is it, you know, how am I feeling about all these other things that are going on around me too?
Yeah,
you know, it's an opportunity to kind of fill some of that time that people complain is really boring.
Yeah, like your comrade just got punched in the face by an ogre. Like, do you not have a reaction to that besides like, all right, I roll to attack the ogre? Like, you just watch them get punched. And how long is a round of combat? Like 2 seconds?
6 seconds.
It's something like that.
6 seconds. Your teammate got like shot by an arrow. That is
and
terrible.
We know that you have an opinion on it. Either like, oh no, that happened, or yeah, that guy deserved it.
Yeah, or like, oh, thank God, I've been waiting for Jeremy to be quiet for an hour. Like, it's just fun. I love that kind of stuff. I live for that kind of like, not immersive, like, you know, if I want to go to a LARP, I'll go to a LARP. But if we're sitting around at a table, like, I love the idea. And it makes for better storytelling, especially when everybody has a point of view about everything that's going on, because we have a point of view about everything going on in real life.
And I think that those are the kinds of games that stick with you longer, too. Those are the kinds that, like, a year later, you're like, remember that time when this thing happened? You're never like, hey, remember when you rolled a natural 20 and then you killed 3 goblins and then you also had your second attack and then this happened? And, like, those aren't the kinds of stories you're telling.
No.
Exactly. Well, now, what if we focus more on a character's actual backstory instead of what they can do? How can we go from there to figuring out what they would be interested in becoming? So basically the reverse of the previous question.
I think
no, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I think that at that point, like, I think that there's a lot of different ways to come. Like, one of the things that's really interesting about like character creation, especially when it's done like separately, is that there's a lot of different roads. Like, all roads kind of point to Rome. Like, we're all coming to a place where we're going to be playing a game together. And like, I think, you know, that kind of goes to the idea that there are different kinds of fun for different people. Some people are fun about like, I want to play a paladin. That's what I want to do. That's what I'm going to play. Like, that's how I'm going to go into it. Some people say, okay, I want to play a character who is on a mission for revenge.
Yeah.
Some people want that other experience, and like, I think that it's valid to say, okay, this is a thing that I am excited about, right? Like, I'm excited about playing a character who has traveled the world and seen everything there is to see. There's also that, and that's kind of the other way to think of it. And then you use that. If that's what you're excited about, if you're excited about these are the backstory elements that really excite me, using that and saying, okay, I'm really excited about a character that has seen everything, knows everyone. All right, now I can start to think, okay, how does that character fit into the confines of a D&D class? Well, that's sounding a lot like a bard or a ranger to me, so I can kind of manufacture those choices, and it just kind of inverts the equation that we were talking about earlier of like, I am this. Well, why? It's like, okay, I am this. How do I express that in gameplay? Because the other half of it is like, you can write a 4-page backstory, but if it doesn't come up at the table. So my advice is write it in a way that, write your character, do the mechanical bits in a way that forces that backstory to come up. If you are a person that has traveled the world and seen every shore, make that your character, pick a class that is built around that, and pick skills that, like, when you use them will give you the opportunity to say, I have this because I have seen everything I've been to every shore in the world. Like, you kind of, instead of taking the class as opportunity to build a backstory, you're taking a backstory and using it as an opportunity to build the mechanical parts of a class.
Yeah, the backstory, I think, will do most of the heavy lifting for you, because if you think of I've said it before, like, no one's born a paladin. You know, there comes there's a point in a person's life where there was a point where they became one. They completed something, training, some ritual, something where that happened. And then what happened leading up to this point where we are all meeting in the bar, there's a bar fight, and we all go, wait a minute, we're all after the same wizard. Like, just think about all the things that led up to that moment, I think. And honestly, anything can work in that department in terms of fueling your character and, like, your backstory. Your backstory can be, like, sometimes the backstory doesn't have to be... I know this sounds contradictory, but I promise it's only because I want the idea of going about this to be well-rounded in a way of, you don't have to do this one way to have a good experience and stuff like that. Like, for me, like, I've had the most fun when I have a very loose backstory and I let the game fill in these details. And I think that's a great way of experiencing it too. Like, if you go into a game and you say, I'm a bard and I want to find treasure, and you're like, all right, great. Your name is Steve Buscemi. You're the bard. And, when we get our hands on treasure.
You're also a national treasure.
I know. I'm also a national treasure.
But not in National Treasure.
No. I'm also some sort of beholder. But also... and just the experience alone of what happens within the confines of the game can also, like, flesh out your character and who they are based on the reactions that you have in that moment. There's a lot of ways to go about this. There's no, like, there's ways to go about it in more of, like, a LARPy role-playing way. And there's some of, like, I kind of just want to experience it in the moment and see who my character turns out to be. How will this character, like we've said before, introduce themselves to me? If this character jumps right into violence and you just go, I'm a fighter, I'm going to jump in, and you get into this bar brawl and you're like, I punched the bartender in the face. You're like, whoa, take a step back. What does that tell me about this person? Good Lord. And so just there's sort of, like I said, there's no right way of going about it. It's what you want to get out of it. And also just, like, what'll be the most fun for you, and what kind of, for me, like, what do you need as a player that day? 'Cause sometimes, like, I want to play a game, but I'm not trying to LARP, and there's ways to still have backstory and have a good time and create a 3D fully fleshed out character when you're a little world weary and have a good time. And that's when, like, your backstory is just for you. And it informs your decisions, but, like, you don't have to, it's not a Daniel Day-Lewis experience. Or like when you're like, well, this dog that I pointed at is very important because I used to be a dog trainer when I was the master kennel smith, blah, blah, blah. It can just be like, I pointed at a dog. I know that that's a golden retriever. You can play however you want, tired, fully energized. There's a way to go about this, making fully developed characters kind of for everyone, honestly. Even people who don't really want to, some people aren't that chatty at the table, especially for those not making a podcast. It's especially important that, like, sometimes you get someone who's not that chatty. and they can have a fully fleshed out character, and you may just never really get to meet them the way you want to. It's just important that because the other end of this is not hogging the table time. It's letting other people develop their stories as well as your own.
Absolutely. And I think that there's a lot of room to go back to like that discussion earlier we had right at the beginning of the episode about collaboration and bouncing ideas off of other people, that some of the most fun games that I've had and the most interesting characters I've had have been because of their interactions with the other characters at the table too, of like, okay, you said this thing about your character and I've said this thing about mine. And so what does that say about our shared backstory too? Like, how did we both end up in this place? Why are we both like this? Or why does that thing about you bother me? Or whatever. That like there's room to not just do this alone in creating your own backstory, because some people do like to write their, 10 pages of backstory and that's super fun. Some people do that and then they come to the table and they're kind of disappointed when it doesn't come up. And I think that there's also room to, interact with people and build that part of it together as you're playing, to say, okay, we found this treasure and I pick out this one particular piece. Well, why did that one call to me? Like, what does that tell me about who I am? Like, why did I prefer the rubies over the emeralds? Well, because this other thing happened. And then, this other character also wants them. So like this sets up a conflict and, you can kind of continually snowball that into something too. And it doesn't all have to be done ahead of time.
No, it's that joy of like, when the age-old like little improv scene when like two people walk into a room at the same time, both of the improv people have a really great idea, but we're only going to go with one of them. Yeah. Like, or else the house of cards will fall apart. Where you have to be complementing each other. Everybody has to be working together in order to tell a story. That is why it's a role-playing game and not like a PowerPoint presentation about my character backstory and their goals, because otherwise it would just be that. Instead, it's like bouncing ideas off of each other. And there's that wonderful moment, like you described with the jewels and the rubies. Like that is the perfect example of when a character that's when they come alive. That's when they change. It's when they grow and everybody gets to meet each other. And that's what makes, I think, the best experiences and the best stories is because it's about the people. Like, I care if the dragon gets killed or not if I live in the town, which I don't. But as someone like experiencing it, I want to know about the people involved. I want to know their stories and like what their experiences are.
Aaron, do you have a problem with my character PowerPoints?
I mean, no, Jeff, so your character PowerPoints, they're great, but can we keep it at 30 slides or less? Most of them are just GIFs and like clip art. So Microsoft clip art. I see you're making a PowerPoint presentation for Dungeons and Dragons. Would you like me to Clippy, no. Clippy, stop.
Is Jeff your Clippy?
Jeff is my Clippy. We are each other's Clippies. Yes. Where it's like, I see you're telling a story here. What if it was a ghost train? Oh my God.
Yes.
Go away. Who invited you?
We often say that to each other. Yeah. Like, no.
No.
Oh gosh.
One of these days you'll get the ghost train in there.
Oh, no, we have a whole Ghost Train episode. There is no in that show. It's like, that's awesome. Jeff literally said in the episode, what if it's a ghost train? I was like, well, it's a ghost train now. Okay, so this phantom train.
I can't unhear it. It's a ghost train now.
If the rule of all my fantasy children is if someone says it, it's canon.
In the first episode, Aaron said, well, this person who wins a pumpkin growing contest, they become the mayor? And it was like, yeah, that's a thing now.
Yeah, they grew the biggest pumpkin. They lead a major city in the world. Well, this has set the tone of the entire show.
The next 3 years of my life.
Yeah, the next 3 years of character creation have completely been tainted by a giant pumpkin.
Hey, that's dedication. Shows you have a good, dedicated spirit.
It's true. Lighthearted energy with hidden that hides in-depth character creation and storytelling. That's our whole game.
Good gourd.
Good gourd.
Good gourd.
I feel like we've kind of answered some of this next question as far as focusing on a character's role in the story and what it can tell us about our characters. But I also want to talk about what it can tell us about our relationships to other characters at the table. So if you've built this backstory and you come in with these things, what can that tell us about how we relate to the other people at the table? Like, how can we bring this back to being something collaborative?
So I think a lot about this. And I want to warn everyone on this podcast recording that you have now activated my trap card. I am flipping it over, and now I'm going to talk about wrestling. Everybody get ready.
Can I make the life point? Can I make the life point sound, Jeff?
Yes.
No! Beep, 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 beep. 0, and I'm banished to the Shadow Realm. Thank you.
There it is.
Welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! With the 4 of us.
I am really excited for all of these Yu-Gi-Oh! References. I'm so here for it.
Excellent, excellent.
So I think about this a lot in terms of, because I think this is very much like professional wrestling in a nutshell. The idea of like focusing on the story and focusing on like how you relate to other characters is something that like happens a lot in wrestling in terms of like, I am a heel. I need the crowd, like my role in the story is to get the crowd to hate me. How I interact with you as a player or you as a character, how I relate to this other character has to be informed by my role in the story, which is to get the audience to hate me. So like you can absolutely use that to say like, okay, cool. I want the end result of this to be that everyone at the table hates me and wants me dead. Like I want to play that character. Obviously, like during session 0, you might want to say to the group, "Hey, is it cool if I do this?"
Yeah,
like,
true.
This is not me. This is the character. But like but then you kind of relate back to like, how is my relationship to this? So I am playing a monster. I am playing somebody that I want the group to have to quote unquote deal with at some point. How do I then relate back to the barbarian or the fighter that is willing to cross a line and do something horrific if it means like bringing justice? How do I relate to that character because they are also willing to do a dark and evil thing? It's like, okay, like having to figure out like, how am I going to bounce off of them that nonetheless tells them I don't trust and don't like you it's another question to generate, right? Like it's another way to say, okay, what here is the story? What here can I pull from this? If I want this reaction, how do I pull it out of this character? And maybe it's as simple as, being willing to cut a bargain and say, okay, we don't have to fight these people because we're going to make a deal and let them on the way. And it's like, well, no, those people are going to go rob children. We have to like put them in jail or something. It's like, no, we struck a deal. They promised us they wouldn't do that anymore.
I think it's important to note too that, the definition of who your character is often based on how they relate to other people, right? Because you don't have a heel if there is no one to be a jerk to. So how you relate to those other people also defines who you are as a person. And so those relationships in that intra-party conflict or lack of conflict says a lot about you as well.
Yeah, it's for me, it's a lot of what your character's goals are and like it comes down to what they want. Like if Jeff wants to play a character that is a heel or a villain, you go, what does this character want? Do they want to cause chaos in the group? They are literally like a mole out to cause chaos and disrupt the progress of this party. Okay, so how are they going to go about getting that? Is it by like derailing the adventure? Is it by like, setting traps for the party? And then you have to go, well, what are my obstacles in that way? Well, it's that paladin where if I cross them, they will cleave me in half. Okay, so how can I still go about getting what I want in this of my character's goals while still like playing within the because there's always a fence. You know what I mean? There's always like a fence keeping boundaries for your characters. You can't just do anything because the obstacles in your way, you have to work around them. You can't always just plow through them. And it's a great way of thinking of your interactions with other characters where it's like, the lovable, it's Legolas and Gimli, where like initially they want the same thing. How they go about getting it is different, and they learn to work together in their own confines based on what they want and how they go about getting it, to ultimately accomplish their goal. So it comes down to how badly do you want this thing? How badly do you want the dragon's treasure? Because if you want it badly enough, your character will make it work playing with basically like Mephisto, on your party. You'll figure it out. You'll figure out a way to get it without, and if you can't, you cross that line, you end up like dueling a person at your table, I guess. And that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's like my kind of game. But
is it really?
That's
like fighting people in your party?
So the last 2 games that I have played in, and both were recorded for actual play, so we were, like going all in. But my character has definitely been punched by another member of the party, and I'm totally okay with that. Like, I'm good with that.
Yeah,
I'm
at peace with that.
Intra-party conflict so much.
Yeah, it's really
so
good. It really is. It sets a nice precedence for like the fragility of the party. Like the parties, we have a party system just because we all have played role playing games in one part or another, where it's like you assume it won't break up. But like if this were real, it's like a band. That thing could split ways at any given time.
Absolutely.
All it needs it's like a little stack of wood covered in gas. All it needs is one thing.
Think of any group project you have ever worked on.
Like group projects in high school?
Exactly. Like, even if it was with your friends, at some point you were like, oh my God, I hate you so much right now. And so, like, it's ridiculous to think that you are, like, wandering the world and killing dragons and, like, you never have a fight with each other. Like, you never have a disagreement.
It drives me crazy.
Silly.
So it drives me crazy, if I may, is the dynamic in character when characters are interacting in a role-playing game where it's like, hail and well met, traveler. I see you're also on the road to the town of Stevenson. All right, we're best friends now, and we're going to fight side by side. What? I don't even know you.
You should not trust strangers.
Yeah, like, I'm not going to turn my back.
Especially with swords.
Yeah. Like, we'll walk to Stevenson together, and together we will fight. Like, no, there has to be that whole chapter of, like, mistrust or complete trust, and that alone will tell you a lot about the character, bringing it on home.
Absolutely. Ryan is over here cringing because Ryan doesn't like inter-party conflict.
I live for it. I think, like, that's good drama.
It is good drama.
That's a show I would watch.
Everybody already does. It's called like Jersey Shore. It's called Real World. It's every reality show is a tabletop adventure party with inter-party conflict.
Oh my God, I want to watch this show now. That is just like
the Bachelor alone, like this dating reality shows. Everybody's after the same thing. How are they going to go about getting it, and what lengths are they willing to go to? What is the obstacle in their way?
There is so much drama on Terrace House. Let me tell you about I'm not going to talk about Terrace House because we're going to be here for 2 hours.
Okay, but but my point is being like these things like inter-party conflict and stuff. Like, do we have it? Do we need it? It's like if it comes up, yeah. There's going to be some drama. If you're playing this legit, like not legit, like, but like if you're playing them as living, breathing characters who have wants and needs, like sometimes there's going to be some drama, sometimes there's going to be cooperation, and that's what makes the fun story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think
it's not that I'm opposed to inter-party conflict.
I mean, I think that there's a point worth saying, though, that like let it happen. It's okay to kind of, I mean, and it. Like Ryan, it may not be for you. You may prefer the kinds of stories that don't involve like people backstabbing each other because you're boring or whatever. But I think that like let some of that stuff happen too, because I think that can create those really rich stories for your characters and kind of define who they are. Because, sometimes I think there's a tendency to be like, oh, no, like to kind of quash it and not let that stuff play out. And I would encourage people to kind of try that and see where it leads you and what does that tell you about who you are.
Yeah, live in the moment in your character, live in the moment as your character until you don't, and then you can hit that X card until you don't want to live in that moment anymore. Like have your limits, and then when you're ready to pull back, you can be like, all right, we're pumping the brakes. I was living a little too much in the moment. And that's how that's how you get them good memories.
Yeah, if you're using proper safety tools, being able to push yourself in those sorts of moments, and then being able to say, all right, I like that this happened, but it's getting a little too intense for me. Let's draw a veil here. And then just move on to the next scene, knowing that your characters have had this wonderful, like, antagonistic interaction with one another. And how does that drive the story forward from that point on? I think that's pretty cool that we can do that in these sorts of games.
Oh, totally.
So coming from the antagonistic approach to role-playing, let's talk about something that's a completely different thing, collaboration, working together. So there's a way in a lot of different games. I'm thinking specifically like genre-based games or like superheroes, magical girls, and probably wrestling would fit this bill as well, where you can create all your characters together and play off of one another with the ideas and whatnot. How do we go about working together to create this sort of theme group?
I even think it's the prime opportunity to like decide if you want conflict, right? Like to say, hey, these are the character. Hey, this is the character that I'm making. Like, are we cool with this? Is a great opportunity to check in and say, like, are we cool with this? Because I know that I'm going to be a problem character. I will, respect any boundaries and everything, whatever safety stuff we set up. Like, obviously, I intend to respect it, but like, I'm going to be playing a character who's a problem. Are we cool with that? But I also think that, like, I think that it's something that a lot of groups do that they don't even realize they're doing it. And I think people could be doing it more because, like, if you think about like an average game of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, a conversation that has come up in almost every game of D&D or a D&D like game that I've played is, hey, okay, cool. What's everyone playing? You're playing a fighter? Do we have a cleric? All right, cool. I'll play cleric. And I think like you're like, whether or not people realize it, they're often already having that conversation, partially because the game expects you to have that conversation. D&D is very specifically balanced towards a party of a rogue, a fighter, a cleric, and a wizard. Like the game is built to run on that engine, so players are already experiencing that. So I think you could push that further and say, okay, cool. Do we have a character that is going to cause drama and like cause social situations that we have to navigate our way out of? Because that's something that I'm passionate about. Do we have a character that is going to, going into like their relationships and their role in the story rather than just a mechanical level? I think is something that you can already, there are conversations that are already being had. So there are more conversations that can be had in that process. And I think, responding with, okay, cool, you want to play a problem person. Maybe I will play the exact opposite so that we specifically get that moment where like the party has to choose between like the righteous paladin and the murderous rogue. Like, it allows you to sort of bounce off and build those moments that you're looking for as a player.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because before doing AP podcasting, I had never done like a collaborative character building session. It was always a thing that we did on our own by ourselves. And then you came back to the table and you're like, ta-da, here's what I have. I mean, aside from like, we would have that kind of minute discussion of, okay, do we have somebody that can do magic? Do we have somebody that can heal? Whatever. But then beyond that, there was nothing. And you would end with people kind of stepping on each other's toes. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's really important to try and at least, if you can't do a full session zero character creation and everything, to at least have those kinds of discussions of, hey, this is the kind of tone we're going for. Mm-hmm. This is the kind of character I want to build. These are the things I want to be good at, whatever it is. Because I think sometimes, A, you end up stepping on people's toes. B, you end up with things that like are so wildly different and incongruous that you can't play a game together. Yeah, and then the GM is sort of forced to like mash things together that don't go together, and nobody feels good about that either. Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yeah. I see it so often when you do the single creation on your own, take 10 hours to create your character, and then you bring them to the table, and then with no expectations of what everybody else is playing. And then it's a matter of, okay, well, I didn't think I was going to be playing this character with this other type of character. And that kind of messes with this part of my character's background. And then character C has this completely different background that has nothing to do with anything. And now the GM has to figure out how all of that fits together. And that doesn't seem exactly fair in most sessions.
It doesn't feel good to anybody. It doesn't feel good to the GM to try and write that game. It doesn't feel good as a player to like sort of have to play the game one at a time because you don't go together. It just doesn't feel good to anybody.
And it feels a little disingenuous when you're playing this character knowing that they would have nothing to do with these people in any normal circumstance. And you're saying, well, I have to stick with them because they're the player characters. You know?
Yeah.
if your character is the goody two-shoes and the paladin, and both the other characters are, cutthroat assassin rogues that are constantly going and killing people, and you can only turn your head, away so many times.
That game sucks. That's pretty much all I have to say in my opinion. Like, that just sucks. That's the people involved. I would say if this is someone listening, if this is your campaign, I'm sorry, but that's bad storytelling right there. That's just, you can make the game work. Like, you could finish the session. Don't make it a good story. That is a bad one. Like, it doesn't have to be like a balanced party where everybody has balanced point of views, but like everybody going after a common goal, or at least people having some semblance, like a story of just people out for chaos and the cleric that heals them. Like, no, that's a Jerry Springer plot line. Like, that's not good storytelling.
Yeah. There has to be a reason that you're sticking together as a group. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a group. If this was, take your characters, all the player characters that you have in the group, make them NPCs. Are they still a group?
Yeah.
And if the answer is
that's a really good thought.
If the answer is no, then you really need to collaborate with your fellow players in order to create at least a common bond that would realistically keep you all together.
So on that note, do you guys have advice for people who are trying to kind of create a connected shared backstory? You've, created your characters and let's say you're pretty comfortable like with how the balance would work and that, these people can be in a group together. Do you have advice on how to like connect them on a deeper level before you start playing this game so that you're not doing we meet in a tavern, we don't know each other, we're friends?
I have an idea. And it comes a lot of what happens in an episode where like when all else fails, you look to the circumstance of the world and like in the world that they're living in, and that will give you some details. That'll give you an idea. That'll give you a spark of like, how do these people connect? Okay, well, what is this adventure? What is my character after? And you don't like, because the tavern is so manufactured that if you think about the world and you go, all right, everyone's in this to defeat a demon. Okay, so there's demons in this world. They are bad. There's people who want to deal with them. What's some common ground we can find? What's a place where we can meet? And that's the storyteller, the DM, GM, whatever's job of like how to bring these people together in the war, because the world is what will inform that decision. It's not the people. The people are affected by the world itself. The people define the world, but how do they end up together is also fueled by the same thing. Like that's the DM using details that we know about things that are in this place, in this realm, that can bring these like-minded, like goals, not like-minded, but people after the same thing together. Look to the world, look to details about the cities and what they're after in the world and what weapons are, what magic is, things like that. Like anything that you pull from in your whatever session 0 can inform that kind of answer of why are these people in the same room deciding to kill the dragon? It's like, is this just the tavern where adventurers meet up? Is this like, is this the Cheers bar for warriors? It can be, but if that's the case, like you go, okay, so yeah, there's a bar in this town where warriors hang out. It's underground. It tells us that it's out of sight because warriors, and people out for bounties are like frowned upon in this city. And then it's like, boom, there. That's why we're all in the same place. Like you can just pull from anything. Once again, just don't let anything slip through your fingers because that can be your answer right there.
For sure.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, I think that one thing that we tend to do on our episodes when we are done creating our characters and we start talking about backstory too, is also like looking at skills and things that they have and saying, okay, why do you have that thing? Did we get that skill from the same place? Is there a reason that we both are, really good at acrobatics? Did we study at this same weird gymnastics summer camp? Like why, and then kind of pulling some of those threads. And so, my connection to Ryan's character wouldn't be the same as to Jeff's character or to Aaron's character or anything like that. But you can kind of start to weave things together that way too. And so looking at the mechanics can be really helpful in those ways to say, like, why do we have the same things? What about us goes together? Or even like, what is the opposite that, you know, we can maybe pull on some of those strings too.
Yeah,
Yep.
it is. Sorry, go ahead, Jeff. Do you have something?
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, I think Powered by the Apocalypse games do this a lot, and it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier about, like, look for the blank spaces in your character and try to find the answer to those. You can just as easily say the blank spaces to those are the other people at the table. And the Powered by the Apocalypse games do a really great job of being like, here's an interesting thing. You're a fighter. That means somebody trained you. Who at the table knows the person that trained you? Like, it presents that opportunity. And I think looking for those blank spaces and saying, that's a thing that I want to, that's a thing that I want to explore with someone at the table creates really interesting results.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a thing that you can pull from other games. This is a thing that keeps coming up on our show, but like the number of different games that you've played, you can start pulling experiences from those games and pull them into your game. So just because D&D isn't a Powered by the Apocalypse game doesn't mean you can't look at one of those sheets and pull some of those questions and say, you know what, let's ask this about our group, you know. And we talked in our last series too about Heroes Unlimited, and you know, you can start like rolling some of those random superpowers for your Masks characters or things like that. Like, feel free to start pulling things from other games too if it helps you have a more full experience in the game that you're playing.
Yeah, it's a case-by-case basis. Like, on any episode of our show, we have, like, a book for just random character creation tables. We have Dungeons & Dragons background tables out. Like, you can, there's no rule to be like, you only have to use this game for making the backstory, you know, for the people that no one will ever hear your backstory. You can use, and in all these character creation tables that all these games have, like, we use, like, all of them in one episode because they're all really good when they work and
they produce interesting results, so we roll with them.
Yeah, and and it keeps you guessing. Like, we love the random table generators because oftentimes it's like, if you consider tabletop like an improv, it's like you come in with a preconceived notion. You come in like, you know, fully loaded, and then like that's usually the worst. It's the best when someone throws you something, it completely throws you, and you have to catch and land on your feet. That's where random tables, I think, in creation give characters a billion resources. Like James D'Amato has a book. Madeline Hale's Table Fables is a great book for tables that we use for, you know, Jeff and I roll this creator of a ghost train. Then we go, okay, let's roll on the guild artisan background. And all of a sudden, like, you know, this character has a child that they don't know about. And you're like, whoa, this is, but it's a very valuable resource for keeping you honest and keeping you like in your living in the moment, even when you're by your, because an important thing when we talk about character creation is like very rarely you get to do it with someone else. Like we are, the four of us are both very lucky that we can do that, you know, with another person and bounce ideas and have a good time. But like if you're by yourself, I think your biggest tool for having a good time is using random generators and just honestly going with the results. So you stay living in the moment, even when you're alone, and you go with where the dice fall, man, you know? And but it's true that they're just an important resource. There's no one game that you should use because a lot of games have really weak character creation systems. If you don't want to have to like pull at threads, like, why am I wearing leather boots? Okay, let's talk about that for 20 minutes. Like, there's not always sometimes the depth that some people are looking for. So it's okay to like stack games on top of each other and make a delicious sandwich.
Is there anything that we did not cover that you guys want to talk about? Is there any like fun stuff that you think people need to know?
I don't think so. I think
plethora of experience.
I think we covered pretty much everything.
Yeah. My only thing that I think more, not like the people should know, is just to like enjoy your characters more, you know. And it sounds like an after school special, but we say it a lot where you let your character introduce themselves to you, you know, get to know them like you're going on a first date or like a first meeting or like a job interview with your character, and you get to know them. You know, don't assume that you know everything about this person and what they would do in a scenario, and just like have fun letting this character become who they are and not things that you like force down their gullet and making them into something. And that sounds corny, but like, you know, we all love the characters that we've played in tabletop games. They're like our children, you know, so you sometimes have to cut the cord and let that child grow a little bit, and in ways that you might not like, but it's best for the child.
They're like all our fantasy children.
What is
Nailed
that?
It. Wrap it up. Call it.
Let me drag on a cigarette and go, never heard of them.
I mean, I feel like we have to end it there.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can't do any better than that.
No, we cannot.
Nailed
it. Thank you both so much for sitting down with us. We really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for having us.
It was. Thank you for having us. This was super cool.
Yeah. Jeff, could you remind everybody where they can find you online and what your projects are?
Absolutely. You can find all of my game design work, my podcasts, everything at jeffstormer.com. You can find Party of One at partyofonepodcast.com, all my fantasy children at allmyfantasychildren.com. And that is pretty much everything. And you can find me on Twitter at Party of One Pod.
For me, you can find me at Aaron Catano-Saez at Twitter. On allmyfantasychildren.com, you can hear all the episodes, submit prompts directly. There's links to our Wikipedia, our Discord, and our Bandcamp because I write all the music that's featured in the episodes.
Oh, wow.
What else do we do?
Twitch.
and on Twitch, I'm twitch.tv/MountHollyHero, MT Holly Hero.
And I am GM Jeff Stormer. I forgot about that as well.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely check out All My Fantasy Children if you can. It's a definitely unique, strange, and interesting way about creating a world through character creation.
Mm-hmm.
One character at a time.
For sure.
I think that it's something that will really appeal to our audience, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Super duper.
There's maybe some overlap there.
Oh, there's no doubt
maybe.
overlap.
Yeah, and brand new on the One Shot Podcast Network.
Yeah.
This is true.
Yes. Network friends.
Network friends.
We need like a secret handshake or something.
It's true. I'm doing it right now. No one's responding. Oh. Okay.
You're so far away.
We'll work on that. Well, thank you again for joining us, and thank you to everyone for listening. We will see you next week. Character Evolution Cast, like Character Creation Cast, is a production of the One Shot Podcast Network and can be found online at www.charactercreationcast.com. Head to the website to get more information on our hosts and guests, or even find some of our character sheets. Character Creation Cast can be found on Twitter at CreationCast. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Bolter, and I can be found on Twitter at Lord Neptune. Our other host, Amelia Antrim, can be found on Twitter at Ginger Reckoning. Music for this episode is used with a Creative Commons license or with permission from the podcast it originated from. Further information can be found within the show notes. This episode was edited by Ryan Bolter. Further information for the game systems discussed and today's guests can also be found in the show notes. Thanks for joining us, and remember, we find that the best part of any role-playing game is character creation. So go out there and create some amazing people. We will see you next time.
I love, Ryan, that your voice gets like an octave deeper whenever you do the countdown every single time.
Because it's
Like-
about to be a blast off.
Movie announcer voice.
I have to get really, really professional, you know.
It's the one time we're professional is the
don't know.
countdown before we record.
Exactly. And I have waveforms.
Oh, yes, I do too. In case you're
Okay.
wondering.
Just slacking on the waveform sounds over there. I see how it is.
Waveform. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Tradition.
I had another point that I was going to make, but it's gone now.
Oh, language.
I mean, darn
I
it.
know.
Sorry. That was under my breath. You can click that out.
We can cut it.
Yeah. This is, yeah.
Well, thank you so both. Let's try this again.
Now we got to read some show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs. Character Creation Cast is hosted by the One Shot Podcast Network. If you enjoyed our show, visit oneshotpodcast.com, where you'll find other great shows like The Broadswords.
The Broadswords is an all-woman D&D podcast focused on drama, roleplay, and subverting stereotypes. Join the Broads as they unravel the mystery of snowy Rashomon, a land ruled by witches and steeped in superstition. Berserkers reign and spirits roam the frozen wastes. Ylaris, Kila, Mipri all have their own reasons for journeying north, but they soon find they have something in common. They are pawns in a divine plot.